What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're reading more famous chapters in the book of Proverbs and also 1 Corinthians 13 in the New Testament, which is super important. So, great daily Bible reading today. And before you read it, a couple things for you to look out for. In chapter 3, there's a theme of trusting the Lord. That's the big theme that runs throughout chapter 3 and really starts to go from trusting the Lord is pitted against trusting in your own wisdom. And God's going to present wisdom, as the whole book of Proverbs is. It's basically God's wisdom for us and how to live our lives that comes through a father to a son. And now what we're going to see is the actual instructions of, hey, if you want to follow God and if you want to live for God, here's what you should do. Trust God. Don't lean on your own understanding. That's the beginning of chapter 3. And then it just goes on and talks about in verse 11, my son, don't despise the discipline of the Lord. Don't look down on the things that God's trying to teach you. Make sure that you're listening to God's word. Make sure you're listening to the people in your life that are speaking God's truth to you. And don't despise his discipline. It says, don't be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him who he loves. As a father, the son in whom he delights. So just like a father is going to discipline his son if he cares for him, God's going to discipline his children as well. And then it goes on to talk about how important wisdom is. Now, if you ask the average person, would you rather be a wise person or a rich person? Most people would say, I'd rather be a rich person because it doesn't matter what I know. What matters more is what I have. Well, the book of Proverbs is very clear that it's more important and better for you to be wise than for you to be rich. Even in the pursuit of wealth, as it's going to talk about in the book of Proverbs, which there's going to be a lot of information. If you want to know what God says about money and what God says about earning money, the book of Proverbs is a great place to start because it has so much information. And the big deal is you need to care about being wise more than you care about being rich. Now, riches are a blessing from God. That's great. But so is wisdom. And wisdom is a more important blessing from God. And it talks about that. Speaking of money, it says in verse 27, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is your power to do it. Talking about giving back and talking about paying your debts off and being a person who uses what he has wisely. Super important. It says, don't envy a man of violence and don't choose any of his ways, which is going to be another important theme that we're going to see for the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, that you're supposed to look at the wise person and say, I want to be like them, instead of looking at the foolish person and saying, I want to be like them. But the problem is some of the foolish people are some of the people with a lot of stuff, and that can be hard for us to understand. But not hard for us to understand, but hard for us to live out in our lives. So that's chapter 3. Chapter 4 goes on and says, hey, make sure that you're holding on to wisdom. Hang on to wisdom because it's valuable. It's important for you to hang on to. It actually personifies wisdom, which we're going to see a lot in the book of Proverbs. Personifies, that means taking something that is doesn't have a person or a personality and pretending like it does have a personality. Describing wisdom as a her. She is prize her highly is what verse 8 says. So you get a lot of her, and you're going to see that with wisdom, and you're also going to see that with folly going on the next few chapters. You're going to see how the book of Proverbs says it's like 2 ladies that you're listening to. Prize highly this lady called Lady Wisdom, not Lady the one who's full of folly. So anyway, you're going to continue to see that. You're also going to see the instructions to avoid certain people and avoid certain places in chapter 4. It says, don't let your heart turn after these people that are disobedient to God. Don't say, oh, I want to be in that friend group. I want to be in that group of people. I want to be associated with that crowd. The book of Proverbs is super clear. Do not desire to be with them because the end is bad for them. And actually, it doesn't just talk about the people on the outside who are doing evil things. It also should remind us at the end of chapter 4 that we need to be careful what our hearts are feeling and what our hearts are choosing to do. It says, keep your heart with all vigilance. Be careful of the outside influences on your heart, but also be careful at what it does. It says, keep it. Keep it with all vigilance, because from it flows the springs of life. Then it says, put away crooked speech and devious talk far away from you. Let your eyes look directly forward, and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. But do not swerve to the right hand or to the left hand, and don't turn your foot away to evil. So, very important to say, look, your heart is going to want to turn in different directions when it comes to, do I want to serve God or do I want to be a foolish person? it says your heart is going to be prone to turn to other things. And it says, be careful. Keep your heart on the straight path. Keep your heart focused towards the Lord. Keep your heart focused on gaining wisdom. Keep your heart focused on obeying God, because your heart is going to naturally, because of its sin, want to turn elsewhere. So that's an important reminder for all of us, to make sure our hearts are focused in the right place. That's an important reminder for us today. Now, in the New Testament, we're shifting over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, famous chapter because it talks about love. And remember where this comes in the book. Remember 1 Corinthians 12, we just talked about serving the church. 1 Corinthians 14, you might not know, but it's going to talk about serving the church again. It's going to talk about how you should focus on building others up in the church. 1 Corinthians 13, obviously, right in the middle of that, because it's about other people. When we think about love, sometimes we turn to this passage and think this is all about how I should feel about myself or feel about things in my life. No, this is about how you are going to show the love of Christ to other people, specifically in your church, because that's the original context this was written, to a church, about how they're supposed to live as a church together. So 1 Corinthians 13 says, hey, if you do a lot of good things for God, but you don't have love for others when you do them, it's pretty much worthless. Paul says, if I do amazing things for God, yet I don't have love, I'm nothing. It's worth nothing in the end. Then he describes what love is. Love is patient and kind. Love does not, on the other hand, so love is a couple things, and then it tells us what love is not, which is helpful for us to think through, am I loving somebody? Well, maybe work through this list and think, well, am I doing these things that it says love is? Am I being patient? Am I being kind? Okay, yeah, I'm doing those things. Well, what about the things that it says love is not? Well, love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but it rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Now, I just read all those verses. It's like 3 or 4 verses here, but there's a huge list of things there. Just notice, when you want to say, am I showing good, proper, Christ-like love to somebody? Take this and say, am I doing this? Does this describe the type of love I'm showing somebody? Because if this doesn't describe the type of love you're showing somebody, if your love is selfish and manipulative and all about me, well, then you're probably not showing the love of Christ. In fact, this text is very clear. You're not showing the love of Christ. So we want to look at this text and say, all right, I want to show the love of Christ to other people. What does that look like? 1 Corinthians 13. Now, I think this is important for us because we might naturally assume that we know how to show love to other people. If I said, hey, you just got to be loving to somebody, you might say, oh, I got that. I know how to do that. And it's really easy. It's not really easy. And even learning how to love, we need to be humble enough to say, I need to look to the Bible to find my description of love and to learn how to love, because we're not good at doing it naturally. Kind of going back to what we said from the book of Proverbs, our heart is inclined to do other things and turn sinfully to other things. We need to make sure our heart is stayed on the right things. And in this chapter, it talks all about love. Now, it goes on and says, love never ends. Some other things that are great and important for building up the church, those will go away. At some point, we won't need faith because we'll be with God. At some point, we won't need these prophecies and things because it will have the completed book. But there will come a time where love will endure forever. And as it is now, there's never going to be a time where love is not important. In the new heavens and the new earth, we will love, and we will continue to show love for one another. So if you think about it, if you right now learn how to show love, you're doing something that you're investing in something that you're going to be doing for all of eternity, showing love to other people. So it's super important that you do that and that we focus on showing love to one another, and also focusing on learning how to do that, which might be the hardest part of all. So thanks for reading with us. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.